Welcome back to the Dark Reading News Desk at RSA 2025. Terry Sweeney here with Dark Reading, and joining us now is Andrew Rubin, CEO and founder of Illumio. Andrew, thank you for joining us on the Dark Reading News Desk.
Thanks so much for having me.
We are talking about something called the post-breach world, which sounds kind of like the Holy Grail. Tell us what you mean when you use that phrase, post-breach world, and what does it look like?
So I think there's probably two answers. One is it's stating the obvious. We are living in a post-breach world because we keep having breaches. And this isn't a new phenomenon. It's not something that started between RSA 2024 and RSA 2025. It's been going on for, let's call it, a decade plus.
Sure.
I think what's changed is the frequency, the severity, and where these breaches are occurring. We're seeing them much more broadly than we did in the past. We're seeing everything from hospitals to local school districts to government agencies getting breached. It's hard not to talk about a post-breach world when it seems like every other day we're reading about a new breach.
Well, especially when they're automated as they become.
And that's part of the velocity that we're seeing increase. So I think one answer is we're stating the obvious, which is we are never again going to live in a world where breaches are not part of reality. That's something we should accept. I think most people have pivoted their mindset there. The second answer is, how do you live in a post-breach world? If you don't admit the problem, you can't possibly figure out how to solve it. So the first step was admitting that we are now in a post-breach world. We are going to continue to live with these events, unfortunately. But the second piece is acknowledging it and then saying, now what do we do about it? How do we build resilience? How do we fix these problems faster? How do we make it so we can survive and thrive, knowing that this is going to be part of the world going forward?
Sure. But we're not admitting that we are powerless against them, are we?
So, there's this great expression about the enemy of a good plan or even a great plan is always a perfect plan. We're not claiming that we're powerless. We're not claiming that we're not going to stop many or even most breaches. But unfortunately, as we all know in cybersecurity, there's this math equation and the math doesn't hold up, which is the defenders are trying to be right 100% of the time and the attacker only has to be right one time.
Sure.
Those are very bad odds if you're on the defense side. So what we're trying to do is reframe the conversation, and I think customers are actually leading the charge on this by saying we're going to be right more often than we're wrong, and we're going to stop most breaches. But we also have to acknowledge that we're not going to stop everything, and we need a strategy and a framework and a set of defenses focused on how do we survive and thrive when we miss.
There's the view that cyber criminals have already adapted, but defenders have not. What's your view on this?
So I think there's definitely a common thread in the thought process that the attackers are more agile, the defenders are a little stuck. I'm a bit of an optimist. It's hard to do this job and not be optimistic that we're going to, as defenders, get better every day. But there is a reality to the fact that it is easy to be an agile attacker. It is a little more difficult to be an agile defender. But the truth of the matter is that in light of the recent breaches and some of the ones that we've experienced even over, let's say, the last year since we sat here last year, I think the defender's mindset is shifting and customers, CISOs, everybody on the defense side of the table is recognizing we've got to go faster. The threat landscape is evolving. We haven't talked about AI,
Sure.
which I'm guessing we'll get to. The threat landscape is moving so quickly. If defenders don't become more agile, we're going to get left in the dust.
There's also a view around both connecting dots, but also finding all the needles in the haystack.
Yep.
Tell us why those things are actually that important to get that granular about this.
Well, we can start by saying that it appears more and more every day that the only technology that really is going to be capable of keeping up with the threat landscape, the size, the scale, the severity, and of course things like AI, the only thing that's really going to give us a fighting shot is thinking about everything in terms of the security graph. And you're hearing that term coming from everybody from Illumio to Microsoft. I think that the future of cyber is going to be predicated on this thing that we refer to as a security graph, which is really understanding what you said. What are all the things in the world and how are they all connected and talking to each other? It's the source of how risk moves around. It's how attackers think about moving through an environment. And I think what we're seeing is a shift to the understanding that we have to think multidimensionally. We need a graph that allows us to see and understand the landscape, both through the eyes of the defender and also through the eyes of the attacker. And the more we understand that graph, and the more we can find those needles in the haystack within the graph, the better a shot we have of two things. One, stopping breaches, and two, when they occur, finding them faster, shutting them down faster, and reducing the blast radius.
Well, so let's dive in on AI. Does AI help deliver this sort of multi-level matrix that SOC professionals and security executives are going to need?
Yeah, I mean, I think the AI question, which often leads into the conversation, is it going to be more powerful for attackers or defenders? And obviously the way that you framed it around, will it help us as defenders, is an important question. I think that first piece about which side benefits more, AI in of itself is a tool, and that tool will be in the hands of attackers and defenders, I'll say equally, meaning both. Right. The one who leverages it better and leverages it more will have the upper hand. I do believe that for the defenders, being able to use AI to comb that graph, to understand and find things that, quite frankly, the human eye or the human brain can't process fast enough or at scale, I think it's an incredibly powerful tool to give the defenders a leg up that they've never had before. So yes, and at Illumio, we're embracing it as much as possible. We've always believed and been based on the security graph since day one. We're now using AI on the graph in order to generate insights into the environment and help the defenders to find every needle in every haystack. And there's a lot of haystacks out there and a lot of needles that we need to find.
Shifting gears slightly, Zero Trust has been an article of faith at RSA and across the industry for, well, it seems like close to a decade, and certainly before the pandemic began.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit, if you will, about how Zero Trust principles get applied in this post-breach world we're talking about.
Yeah, so really we could actually say 15 years. And the reason I say that is because Illumio is incredibly fortunate to have John Kindervag as our chief evangelist. And one of the few things that isn't debated at all in our industry is where was the term Zero Trust coined, and it was John at Forrester that coined it about 15 years ago. Of course, it didn't get a whole lot of attention for a long time, and then all of a sudden it seemed to get all the attention in the world recently. I think one of the reasons why John and I have known each other a long time and always agreed on this notion of Zero Trust long before it was in vogue, one of the reasons why is because we both have said the same thing independently, which is Zero Trust is not a vendor, and it certainly isn't a product. Zero Trust is a strategy and an architecture and a framework that you choose to adopt. And then you partner with vendors and buy certain products and deploy them a certain way to live within that strategy, architecture, and framework. But the notion from the very beginning, what John wrote about 15 or so years ago, was simple, which is we live in a world in which everything should be by default untrusted. It doesn't mean everything is evil or everything is bad, but if you start from that premise, then it's very easy to say, is this thing that's happening, this connection that's occurring, is it something that should be? Because I'm assuming by default that it shouldn't. And I think what's happened is now in this post-breach world, we're recognizing that there are a lot of things that are happening in our environments that shouldn't be or don't need to be. Why are we allowing that to continue? And I think that's where Zero Trust in the post-breach world, and certainly what we do at Illumio, I think that's where these things come together.
Some may argue that the post-breach world is a hypothetical future that we'll never actually achieve. Others may say maybe you're being a little bit alarmist. Take us out with some thoughts about why those might be right or wrong.
Well, let's deal with the alarmist comment first. If we were to sit down and we were to make a list of just the breaches since January 1st of 2024, I don't think that it is unreasonable to say that our track record of living in a non-breach world is going to hold a whole lot of water. Just since January 1st of 2024. We could probably even make the list from January 1st of 2025 and still win the argument. We are living in a post-breach world. It's not alarmist. It's based on data, it's based on evidence, and it's based on reality. So I don't think it's an opinion. I think it's just looking at the data and saying this is where we are and this is where we've been for some time, and it actually seems to be getting worse, not better. But again, if you can admit a problem, then you can start to think about how do I solve it? How do I live with it? How do I make it better? So if we are there, and I actually really do believe that most people don't view it as alarmist, they actually agree, we're going to have to continue to live with ransomware and breaches. I think that's a healthy thing in a lot of ways because it starts to shift the conversation towards, so how do we do this better? And nobody says give up on defense. Nobody says give up on detection. Sure. What we say is that is one set of tools. And now we need another set of tools to contain these things, stop these things faster, prevent them from becoming disasters and catastrophes. And if we do both jobs well, we actually have a really good shot at surviving and thriving in a world where breaches are part of our story.
All right, well, you make an effective case for the post-breach world. Andrew, really appreciate you doing the Dark Reading News Desk.
Thanks so much for having me. Hopefully see you next year.
We've been talking with Andrew Rubin of Illumio. This has been Terry Sweeney for Dark Reading. Thanks for joining us for this segment. We'll see you next time.